The humidity in Birmingham during June doesn't just sit on you. It pushes. I was on my hands and knees on the front porch of the bungalow, scrubbing a stubborn ring of mildew off the concrete with a stiff brush and a bucket of bleach water. My lower back was already humming with that dull ache that tells me I've spent too many hours leaning over things. But the porch was a priority. If I didn't get it done now, the rain would just smear the grime back into the pores of the stone. Mrs. Gable, who lives 3 houses down and spends a significant portion of her day monitoring the neighborhood from behind her screen door, paused at the edge of my walkway. She was wearing one of those floral housecoats that looked like it had been washed since the 70s. "You're still at it, Kayla," she said, shielding her eyes from the glare. "I saw Christopher's new rig parked over at the supply house this morning. That big dually with the lift? He told me you two were finally expanding the fleet. Must be a relief to have the credit. Sorted out." I stopped scrubbing. I looked up at her, my palms pruned and smelling of chlorine. "Christopher is Jerry's younger brother, and he's been expanding his plumbing business for 6 years, which usually means he's buying a new tool he can't afford and then asking Jerry for a loan to cover his electric bill." "Expanding?" I asked. "I didn't know he got a new truck." Mrs. Gable gave me a look. That particular southern look that suggests I'm the one who's confused. "He said it was a joint venture. Said you were handling the back end of the financing to keep the interest low." "Well, good for y'all. It's nice when family sticks together." She wandered off before I could tell her I hadn't spoken to Christopher in 3 weeks. I sat back on my heels, the bleach water soaking into the knees of my leggings. I didn't think much of it at first. Christopher likes to talk, and Jerry likes to be the hero who saves his brother from his own bad math. I figured Christopher was just bragging to the neighbors again, using "we" to make himself sound like a corporate entity instead of a guy with 2 leaky vans and a mounting pile of invoices. Then my phone buzzed in the pocket of my leggings. It was a text notification from an automated system. I wiped my hand on my thigh and pulled the phone out. It was a message from a vendor I'd never heard of. Southern Pipe and Supply. Final notice. Your account balance of $4,218 is now 30 days past due. Please log in to your portal to avoid a credit reporting event. I stared at the screen. I don't buy industrial piping. I run a cleaning service. I buy microfiber cloths and concentrated degrazers in bulk. I tried to remember if I'd ever signed anything for Jerry or Christopher. Some vague, just-in-case paperwork during one of those Sunday dinners where Jerry gets an idea about family legacy. I couldn't remember a single thing. I tapped the link in the text. It took me to a login page for the vendor. I tried my email. In fact username, I tried my phone number. In fact username, I clicked forgot password. A second later, a password reset email arrived. I opened it, but the email address listed for the account wasn't mine. It was a secondary Gmail address that Jerry had set up years ago for household administration. An account I'd never been given the password for, because Jerry said it was easier if he just handled the digital filing. The irritation hit me first, a sharp heat that had nothing to do with the Alabama sun. I didn't go back to scrubbing. I left the bucket and the brush right there on the porch and went inside. Jerry was in the living room, leaning back in his recliner with his laptop on his chest, probably reviewing some curriculum for the community college. He looked peaceful, which only made the feeling in my chest tighten. "Jerry," I said, standing in the doorway, "why am I getting past due notices from Southern Pipe and Supply?" He didn't look up from the screen for a few seconds. "What's that?" "The vendor. The one that says I have a $4,000 balance and a credit risk." I walked over and held the phone in front of his face. "Since when do I have an account with a plumbing supplier?" Jerry shifted the laptop. He didn't look surprised, which was the first red flag. He looked inconvenienced. "It's just a bridge, Kayla. Christopher hit a snag with his line of credit last quarter. I just used your name to get him a vendor account with better terms. It was the only way to get the materials for the Highland project. Used my name, I felt the air leave my lungs. You opened a credit line in my name without telling me?" "I didn't open a line, exactly," he said, his voice sliding into that administrator tone he used when he was explaining a policy to a confused student. I just listed you as the primary guarantor because your credit score is higher. It's a formality. Christopher's just in a pinch. He's going to square it as soon as the Highland check clears. A formality is a signature on a greeting card, Jerry. This is a debt. Don't make it a thing, he said, finally closing the laptop. We're a family. We help each other. You know how Christopher is. If he loses this contract, he's underwater. I looked at the phone, then back at him. I wanted to scream, but I was too tired. I thought about the 3 clients I'd had to reschedule this week because my own childcare had fallen through, and I'd spent my Tuesday driving my niece to the clinic. I thought about the way I meticulously tracked every cent of my cleaning business just to make sure we could afford the mortgage. Jerry didn't move from the recliner. He just sighed, the kind of sound a man makes when he thinks his wife is being unnecessarily dramatic about a simple misunderstanding. I'll call Christopher, he said. He'll probably just forget to hit send on the transfer. It's a glitch, Kayla. These portals are a mess. A glitch doesn't put my name on a $4,000 debt, I said. I wanted the password to that administration email. I wanted to see exactly how many other glitches were sitting in a digital folder I wasn't allowed to touch. Give me the password for that Gmail account. Jerry shifted, his laptop sliding a few inches down his stomach. I can't just give you that. It's got all the tax stuff and the insurance policies for the house. It's organized a certain way. I'll just log in and show you the payment confirmation once it goes through. I stood there for a minute, the smell of bleach still clinging to my skin, feeling the heavy, wet air of the living room pressing in on me. I was exhausted. My back was throbbing, and I had a list of 3 different pharmacy refills to pick up before the stores closed. The familiar pattern took over. Jerry was the one who liked the spreadsheets. Jerry was the one who handled the boring digital filing, and Jerry usually got the details right. I figured he'd just been trying to help his brother without causing a fuss, and that the debt was genuinely a temporary lapse in Christopher's chaotic bookkeeping. Fine, I said, but I want to see the confirmation by tomorrow. You'll see it, he said, already looking back at his screen. I went back outside and finished the porch, but I didn't scrub as hard. I spent the next 2 days in a state of low-grade irritation, waiting for him to mention the payment. He didn't. Every time I brought it up, he had a new variation of the same answer. The Highland check was delayed. Christopher was waiting on a signature from the site manager. It was a bridge, he kept saying. The cost of that bridge hit me on Thursday morning. I had a 9 a.m. appointment with a regular client, a woman named Diane who lived in a tidy little place over in Mountain Brook. Diane was a dream client. She paid in cash and didn't mind if I took a 15-minute break to sit in the shade of her magnolia tree. But Diane was also a stickler for the clock. If I was 10 minutes late, she'd spend the first half hour of the cleaning talking about the importance of professional reliability. At 8:15 a.m., while I was loading the vacuum and the caddy into my car, my phone rang. It wasn't Jerry. It was a number from a local area code I didn't recognize. Is this Kayla Vincent? The woman on the other end asked. Her voice was clipped, the sound of someone who spent 8 hours a day reading scripts. Yes, I said. I'm calling from the accounts department at Southern Pipe and Supply. We've attempted to contact the primary guarantor regarding account number 8842. The balance is now 45 days past due, and we are initiating the process to move this to a third-party collection agency. I stopped with my hand on the car door. I was told this was being handled. I need to speak with the account manager. I am the account manager. Ms. Vincent. We have no record of a payment plan. If you can provide a credit card number for the full balance of $4,218 now, we can halt the reporting process. I spent the next hour and 15 minutes on the phone. I didn't have $4,000 just sitting in a checking account. And I certainly wasn't paying for Christopher's PVC pipes. I tried to explain the situation, but the woman didn't care about family loyalty or bridges. She only cared about the guarantor's signature. I tried to log into the portal again, hoping that maybe Jerry had changed the password and forgotten to tell me, but the forgot password link now sent the reset email to a completely different address, one I didn't recognize at all. It wasn't the administration email. It was something encrypted and short. By the time I hung up, it was 9:30 a.m. I drove to Diane's house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I walked through her front door, she was already standing in the foyer, looking at her watch. "You're late, Kayla," she said. She didn't sound angry, just disappointed, which was worse. "I have the bridge club coming over at noon. I really need the guest room finished." I spent the morning cleaning faster than I ever had, skipping my break and ignoring the cramp in my calf. I felt like a fraud, scrubbing a guest room for a woman who valued punctuality while my own financial reputation was being dismantled in a series of emails I wasn't allowed to see. I lost the usual tip Diane gave me, $20 that usually went toward my gas for the week, and I left her house feeling physically sick. When I got home, Jerry was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of iced tea. He looked relaxed, as if the last few days had been entirely seamless. "Did you fix it?" I asked. I didn't shout. I was too tired to shout. "I'm working on it, Kayla. Christopher's just having a hard time with the Highland payout. It's a cash flow issue, not a debt issue." "I missed a deadline with Diane this morning because I was on the phone with a collections agent," I said. "They're reporting me, Jerry. They're reporting my credit." He didn't look at me. He looked at the ice in his glass. "It won't come to that. Just give me another week." "I can't give you another week of my credit score." I walked past him to the small desk in the hallway, where he kept his physical files. He'd left a folder open, a manila envelope with Stefan's Plumbing, scrawled across the tab in Christopher's messy handwriting. I reached inside and pulled out a carbon copy of a vendor application. There it was. My name, my address, and my social security number all typed out in a neat digital font. At the bottom, where the primary guarantor was supposed to sign, there was a signature. It wasn't my signature. It was a clumsy imitation, the loop of the "we." And Vincent pulled too far to the left, like someone had been trying to draw a picture of my handwriting rather than actually writing. I stared at the ink, my heart doing a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch in a portal. It was a forgery. I carried the paper into the kitchen. Jerry was still there, leaning against the counter, the ice in his tea long since melted. "You signed this," I said, laying the carbon copy on the laminate surface between us. "You signed my name." Jerry didn't reach for the paper. He didn't even look at it. He just shifted his weight, his eyes tracking a fly buzzing near the window. "I did what I had to do to keep the business afloat, Kayla." If Christopher had lost that vendor account, he wouldn't have been able to buy the copper for the Highland job. He would have been out of work. "Since when is your brother's employment my financial liability?" "It's all the same pot," he said, his voice dropping into that reasonable administrator tone. "We're a household." I just smoothed over a rough patch. I knew you'd overthink it, and by the time we argued about the ethics of a guarantor form, the window would have closed. I was protecting the family. "You were protecting your ego," I said. "You wanted to be the one who saved him, but you didn't want to use your own credit to do it." He finally looked at me, his expression shifting from avoidance to a flicker of irritation. "That's not fair. I handle the taxes, the insurance, the digital filing, everything you don't want to touch. I do the heavy lifting on the administration of this life, and the one time I take a shortcut to help my brother, you treat me like a criminal." I didn't argue. I couldn't. The heat in the kitchen felt like it was thickening, making it hard to draw a full breath. I thought about that administration email, the one he refused to give me the password for. It wasn't a filing system. It was a curtain. He hadn't been organizing our lives. He'd been managing a series of secrets, keeping the paper trail just far enough out of my reach that I'd have to ask him for the truth. I walked away from him and went into the hallway, leaning my back against the wall. My mind went back to the Northside Medical Plaza. For 3 months, I'd been courting the management company for the plaza. It was a 4-building complex with a rotating staff of doctors and a high-traffic lobby. If I landed the contract, I could hire 2 more part-time employees and finally stop scrubbing porches on my weekends. The bid was due last Wednesday. I'd had the proposal written. I'd had the references lined up. But the application required a basic financial disclosure and a credit check to ensure the vendor had the liquidity to handle the supplies for a contract that size. I had waited. I'd told myself that if I just gave Jerry a few days to fix the glitch with Southern Pipe and Supply, my credit report would be clean. I didn't want to submit a bid with a pending collections notice hanging over my head. I'd assumed the familiar explanation that Jerry was just a bit slow with the digital side of things was the truth. I'd trusted the man I'd shared a bed with for years over the automated text message on my phone. I checked my email on my phone. There was a message from the plaza's procurement officer sent yesterday afternoon. Dear Miss Vincent, thank you for your interest in the Northside Medical Plaza contract. As we did not receive your completed bid by the Wednesday deadline, we have moved forward with another provider. We will keep your information on file for future openings. I felt a wave of nausea. That contract would have been a 20% jump in my annual revenue. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the time. It was about not having to drive to Mountain Brook at 8:30 a.m. and pray that I wasn't 10 minutes late. I walked back into the kitchen. Jerry was still there, now scrolling through his phone, probably checking the community college's faculty portal. He looked so settled in his own skin, so sure that the world worked the way he decided it should. I missed the Northside bid, I said. He didn't look up. What's that? The medical plaza, the contract I've been talking about for 3 months. The deadline was Wednesday. Oh, he said, his voice flat. That's a shame. Maybe they'll have another opening soon. I missed it because I was waiting for you to fix the mess you made with my credit, I said. I waited because I thought you were just being clumsy. I didn't realize you were lying. Jerry sighed and finally put the phone down. Kayla, let's not be dramatic. It's one contract. You've got plenty of other clients. Why are you letting this one thing spiral into a crisis? Because it's not one thing, Jerry. It's the fact that you decided my name was a tool you could use without asking. It's the fact that you forged my signature. It's the fact that you've spent years making me feel like I'm the one who's bad with the boring stuff, while you were using that as a cover to move money and credit around behind my back. I was helping Christopher, he repeated, his voice rising. He's my brother. And I'm your wife, I said. But apparently, in your version of this family, I'm just the guarantor. He didn't have an answer for that, so he did what he always did when the conversation stopped serving him. He stood up and walked out of the room, heading toward the detached garage, probably to tinker with something, or avoid me for an hour. I stayed in the kitchen, looking at the forged signature on the laminate. I realized then that this wasn't a cash flow problem. Christopher could be bankrupt or a millionaire. It wouldn't change the fact that Jerry had decided he had the authority to sign my name. He had treated my identity like a shared resource, something he could dip into whenever he wanted to play the hero. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 4. I had a pharmacy run to make, and the humidity was still clinging to the walls. I felt a strange, cold sort of tiredness, the kind that doesn't go away with a nap. I had spent so long making sure everyone else was stable, making sure the house was clean, and the bills were paid, and the family reputation was intact, that I'd stopped checking the locks on my own life. I picked up the carbon copy and folded it into a small, tight square. I didn't throw it away. I put it in the pocket of my leggings, right next to my phone. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't go back to scrubbing the porch and pretending I didn't see the grime in the pores of the stone. I drove to the pharmacy in a haze, the air conditioning in my car struggling against the Birmingham heat. I spent 20 minutes in line at the CVS, staring at the back of a man's neck, and thinking about the way I'd handled our finances for the last decade. I'd always told myself I was being a supportive partner by letting Jerry manage the digital side of things. I'd called it trust, but as I waited for my prescriptions, I realized that if I'd actually checked the accounts, I wouldn't have had to deal with the friction of his ego or the guilt of his brother's failures. I had traded the truth for a quieter house. I admit that trust and avoidance had become difficult to tell apart. By the time I got back to the bungalow, the sun was dipping, turning the sky a bruised purple. Jerry had come back inside. He was standing in the kitchen, having cleared away the carbon copy I'd left on the counter, though I still had the folded square in my pocket. He had a plate of sandwiches laid out, as if a meal could reset the clock to a time before I knew he'd forged my signature. I talked to Christopher, Jerry said, not looking at me. He's got a lead on a new project in Hoover. He says he can have the 4,000 to you by the end of the month. We just need to keep the vendor off your back for a few more weeks. I'm not keeping anyone off my back, Jerry. My name is on that account. My credit is the one taking the hit. It's a temporary dip, Kayla. It'll bounce back. I didn't sit down. I didn't touch the sandwiches. I pulled the folded paper from my pocket and flattened it out on the counter, right over the spot where he'd tried to hide it. The vendor doesn't care about a project in Hoover, I said. They care that someone signed my name without my permission. I want the password to that administration email. Now. Jerry stepped back, his shoulders hunching. I already told you. It's a mess in there. I'll just print out what you need. I don't want to print out. I want the login. I want to see every account that has my social security number attached to it. He stayed silent. For a long time, the only sound the ticking of the clock over the stove. He looked like he wanted to use that administrator voice again to explain why my request was inefficient or unnecessary. But the forgery was right there on the laminate. There was no policy to hide behind. I didn't think it would actually go to collections, he muttered. Christopher said he had it handled. That's not the point. The point is that you decided you had the authority to lie to me and the authority to pretend to be me. Jerry sighed and finally looked at me, his expression a mix of exhaustion and a lingering stubborn resentment. I signed your name because I knew you'd fight me on it, Jerry said. The sentence was so plain, it felt like a physical blow. He hadn't just made a mistake to help his brother. He had consciously decided that my consent was a hurdle to be bypassed. He had viewed my boundaries as an inconvenience to be managed. You thought I'd fight you, I repeated. Because I'm the one who actually cares about the bills. Because I'm the one who doesn't think a bridge is a valid financial strategy. You're so rigid about the numbers. Kayla, I just wanted to solve the problem without a 3-hour argument. So you lied for 6 months to avoid a 3-hour argument. It wasn't 6 months. It was a few months. The account is 45 days past due, Jerry. The lie started the second you put pen to paper. He didn't apologize. He didn't say he was sorry for the forgery or for the lost contract at the medical plaza. He just stood there, looking at the sandwiches, as if he were waiting for me to get tired and go back to my role as the person who keeps the household functioning. He assumed that because I'd always eventually folded, because I'd always prioritized the stability of the family over my own irritation, that I would do it this time too. I felt the weight of the pharmacy bags on the counter and the dull ache in my lower back. I thought about the Northside Medical Plaza and the 20% jump in revenue that was now gone. I thought about the way I'd spent my Tuesday driving my niece to the clinic while Jerry was likely smoothing over another crisis for Christopher. I'm not paying that balance, I said. What? We have to. Your credit. I'm not paying it from my business account, and I'm not paying it from our joint savings. You and Christopher can figure out how to get that money together. If the vendor reports me, they report me. I'd rather have a ding on my credit score than a husband I can't trust with a piece of paper. Jerry looked genuinely shocked. You'd actually let your credit drop? Over $4,000? It's not about the $4,000. Jerry. It's about the fact that I can't afford to be the only person in this house who's honest about the money. I walked out of the kitchen and went into the bedroom. I didn't slam the door, but I closed it firmly. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone. I had a few messages from other clients. Small jobs that kept me busy but didn't move the needle. I knew that as long as I was the primary engine for our household's practical stability, Jerry would always feel comfortable treating my resources as a safety net. He didn't respect the boundaries because he'd never felt the consequence of them breaking. I spent the next hour scrolling through job boards. I didn't look for more cleaning contracts. I looked for something stable, something with a payroll department and a W-2, something that didn't depend on my ability to scrub a porch or negotiate with a vendor. I found a listing for an office manager position at a pediatric clinic across town. It paid less than the Medical Plaza contract would have. But it was a salary. It was a separate stream of income that wouldn't be part of the pot. I didn't tell Jerry when I sent the application. I didn't tell him that I was changing the passwords to my personal bank accounts and removing him as a joint owner on the business line. I just lay there in the humid quiet of the bedroom, listening to him move around in the kitchen, probably wondering when I'd come back out to help him clean up the sandwiches. I didn't go back out. I stayed in the room until the house went dark, holding the folded piece of paper in my hand, remembering exactly how the loop of the Y in my name had been pulled too far to the left. The pediatric clinic across town smelled like a mixture of industrial lemon cleaner and bubble gum. It wasn't the same as the smell of my own business, which usually leaned toward heavy-duty degreaser and old dust. But it was a smell that came with a steady paycheck. I started as the office manager in July, just as the Birmingham heat reached that point where the air feels like a wet blanket you can't kick off. My commute was 20 minutes longer, and I spent most of it listening to the traffic reports on the radio, worrying about accidents on I-65 that would make me late. But for the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about whether a client would tip me enough to cover my gas for the week. I had a desk, a swivel chair that creaked every time I leaned back, and a W-2 that belonged only to me. I kept my cleaning business on a skeleton schedule, taking only the 3 most reliable clients who didn't mind that I could only come on Friday afternoons. Jerry didn't like the change. He didn't say it in a way that sounded like a complaint. He said it in a way that sounded like concern. He'd ask if I was overextended or if the stress of a corporate environment was too much for me. In reality, he just missed having me as the household's primary shock absorber. He missed the version of me that postponed her own peace to make sure his life remained frictionless. The real test came in August. It was a Tuesday, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of my own bills, the kind I now paid from an account Jerry couldn't see. Jerry walked in, holding a piece of paper. He didn't look at me at first. He just laid the paper on the table, right on top of my electric bill. It was a revised credit application for a different supplier. This one for plumbing fixtures and high-end faucets. Christopher's trying to land a contract for a boutique hotel in downtown, Jerry said, his voice sliding into that reasonable administrator tone. He just needs a cosigner for the initial order. It's a small amount, and the deposit is already half covered. If you could just sign the bottom, he can get the materials by Friday. I didn't pick up the paper. I didn't even move my hand. No, Jerry blinked. He looked at the paper, then back at me. Kayla, it's just a formality. This isn't like the other thing. This is a secured order. It's a signature, Jerry. My signature. On a debt. It's for the family, he said. He sounded tired, as if my refusal was a personal failing on my part. Why are you still holding on to this? I thought we were moving past it. We move past it when the records are corrected, I said. I checked my credit report last week. Southern Pipe and Supply is still listed as a pending collection. My name is still on that account. Jerry shifted his weight, looking toward the hallway. I told you Christopher is working on it. He's just waiting on the Hoover payment. I don't care about the Hoover payment, I said. I care about the record. You told me you'd fix it. You haven't. I can't just wave a magic wand and make a vendor delete a guarantor, he muttered. You can pay the balance, I said. You can take it out of your savings, or you can take it out of your salary. But until I get a written confirmation from that vendor that my name has been removed from the account and the balance is 0, I am not signing a single piece of paper for your brother. Jerry looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't try to explain the system or the bridge. He looked frustrated, almost angry, that the old rules didn't apply anymore. He didn't apologize for the forgery or the lost contract at the medical plaza. He just sighed and picked up the application. Fine, he said. I'll handle it. It took another 2 weeks. Jerry didn't want to talk about it, but he eventually sent me a screenshot of an email from the Southern Pipe and Supply portal. It was a formal notice stating that the account balance had been paid in full and that Kayla Vincent had been removed as the primary guarantor. He'd had to dip into the money he'd been saving for a new deck on the back of the bungalow to cover the cost. He didn't mention the money, but he stopped talking about the deck. The power in the house had shifted, though it wasn't a loud or dramatic change. It was just a quiet realization that I wasn't the safety net anymore. Jerry started handling his own digital filing with more care, and he stopped mentioning the pot when it came to money. He learned that if he wanted something done, he had to ask me. And that asking didn't mean informing me of a decision he'd already made. A few days after the Southern Pipe issue was settled, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Christopher. "Hey Kay, Jerry says the credit is all clear now. I've got a lead on some new equipment that would really help the crew. Think you could help me out with a small bridge loan until the hotel job kicks in? Just a couple grand?" I looked at the message for a long time. I thought about the mildew on the porch, the way my back used to ache every single day, and the feeling of being a ghost in my own financial life. I thought about the pediatric clinic, where my boss knew exactly who I was and paid me exactly what I was worth. I didn't call him. I didn't explain the history of the forgery or tell him how his bridges had almost cost me my business. I didn't feel the need to be the teacher or the victim. I typed a short reply and hit send. No, I put the phone face down on the dresser and went to sleep. I didn't wonder if he was angry or if Jerry would be upset. I just liked the way the room felt, quiet, stable, and entirely my own.